Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we are going to review the book Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. If you remember, it is the last book in the Hunger Games trilogy, so I'm happy that I'm finishing it. Again, as I said, it's the last book, so it has the similar characters of Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark, and Katniss's friend Gale, who I remember saying was male, and which was kind of fun. But if you remember the review that I did of the second book, Catching Fire, at the end of the book, the Katniss again wins the Hunger Games, although it's not a solo win like the original Hunger Games. It's a whole big group of people that won, and she learns at the very end that that her home District 12 is destroyed. So then she's feeling very sorry for herself because she does not know where to go. And she's like, I really have no home anymore. And that's kind of where book number 2 ends. And book number 3, this current book, starts off with her living in the once deserted district of District 13 before they thought that District 13 no longer existed because they had thought that it had been destroyed when the rebellion towards the capital was taking place many years ago. And however, pretty soon, as you know, Katniss realizes that is not true, and that people had been fleeing to District 13 over the years. So that's where she, Peeta, Gale, and a number of other people, including her mother and sister, end up living. And towards the very beginning of the book, the people of District 13 realize that they have to take out the capital, and they have to end Capitol's rule, and especially the President Snow's rule, once and for all. So a big band of familiar characters get together and kind of start and lead a rebellion that's led by Katniss, because they realize that Katniss is probably the best one to lead this rebellion, and Katniss herself has said that she would like to be the one that ends up killing President Snow. So and what happens actually to the character of Peeta at the end is that Peeta doesn't return home quite as quickly as Katniss does, or he doesn't return to District 13. He is being held captive by President Snow, and Katniss learns that President Snow is basically torturing Peeta for information on Katniss and her whereabouts, and just any information that he does not already have on her. And President Snow eventually brainwashes Peeta, where eventually when Peeta is reconciled with Katniss and rejoins the group, he is very mean to her because President Snow is trying to make Katniss out to be the enemy and and she is thought to be the reason why the Hunger Games are no longer there and why all of this rebellion is taking place. And that's not entirely true, but President Snow is making it seem that Katniss had a hand in everything and was the leader of everything. So, and again, Peeta's whole family was destroyed when District 4 was destroyed, or District 12 was destroyed, excuse me. And so that understandably makes Peeta very angry at Katniss and things like that. So I was not very happy with this book because there wasn't... I found myself being able to read it quickly, which I was happy about, but then I was freaking out because I was like, well, I've got to be missing something. And really I wasn't, because it was most of the book was just kind of them figuring out how they were going to get from District 13 to the capital, which was a ways away. So, and and then just kind of basically dealing with Katniss's feelings towards Peeta as he is not recognizing her and realizing, or her questioning, does she love him genuinely, or again is her feelings more of a trick for the game. And eventually they do reach the capital, and of course it's guarded by these things that are ironically named peacekeepers, but they work for the capital, and they the group seems to realize that the people, the kind of townspeople that live in the capital, are scurrying everywhere to run away from the peacekeepers, so they end up disguising themselves as civilians, because there was an explosion right when they were leaving or in the capital, and it was told to all of Panem that Katniss and her group were destroyed and killed. And so, but then the people that were responsible for that destruction went to the, where they were supposedly destroyed, and did not find Katniss, so they realized that she had survived, and most of her group had also survived. There were some deaths, but again, most of her group had survived. And they again try to get in, but they realize that the children of the officers in the capital are being held kind of as a force field in the President Snow's mansion. And so they were like, well, we can't really get in because we don't want to kill innocent lives with us. So and then kind of, this is also kind of confusing and kind of weird, because you're reading about this and then all of a sudden these things happen. Kind of like in the Hunger Games, this hovercraft comes by and drops presents for the children that they think is food and gifts, because essentially they're starving, or the capital is starving the children and starving the civilians, so they're thinking, oh, they're actually being nice and grabbing the gifts, but the gifts is a trick, and the gifts are actually bombs that once they open, all the bombs go off and the people are killed. And so then somehow, and then Katniss, somehow in that ruckus, notices her sister Primrose, who is older. She's about 14, and she has become kind of an intern in a kind of a medic lab, or a medic, kind of like an EMS person. And so she rushes in to help all of the kids who have been hurt by the bombs. And Katniss notices Primrose as another present bomb goes off and in front of Primrose. So unfortunately Primrose is killed, and Katniss just basically loses her sanity after that, and she ends up fainting, but she doesn't die. She is taken into the president's mansion, which is where she wanted to go in the first place. So then she tries to find President Snow throughout the mansion, and she eventually does, but he has kind of been taken captive anyway. He is being tried, and eventually he's found guilty, and the people from Katniss's original rebellion who are still alive, some again, when all the bombs went off, some died, but some are alive, kind of meet in a room and say, well, once President Snow is going to be executed, and we do want Katniss to be the one to shoot him and to kill him, but we also want the capital to be punished, and we want them the capital's children, the ones who survived, to actually play the Hunger Games themselves, to kind of see how they like it. And and Katniss agrees with this, which I thought was surprising because I figured she'd want nothing less or nothing more to do with the Hunger Games, and she would not want that ever again. Um, and all of this is done by the president of District 13, who is a woman named President Coin, and she's been sort of Katniss's ally, but Katniss kind of trusts her kind of is the same as she trusts everybody else. She doesn't really trust, she's with them but doesn't trust them. And um and so but then Katniss meets with President Snow during his execution, and President Snow kind of tells her that the hovercraft bringing the presents that eventually killed Katniss' sister was arranged by President Coin, and Katniss realizes that President Snow is telling the truth, and so instead of killing President Snow with her bow and arrow, Katniss kills President Coin, and that was very surprising for me. And then President Snow just starts laughing, and all through the two moments with President Snow that Katniss faces, he is coughing more and more, and he's coughing up blood. So in my eyes, I thought that her killing President Coin instead of President Snow was even better, because kind of President Snow's going to die anyway, because obviously coughing out blood is not good. So, and as soon as Katniss kills President Coin, there's a riot ensues, and somehow President Snow is killed that way. We don't know if he ends up choking on his own blood when he laughed, or if he ended up being trampled. But anyway, he's dead, and kind of the Capitol kind of implodes on itself, and that's kind of where the normal book ends. There is an epilogue where throughout the book, along with our Katniss and the rebellious group have been trying to work with Peeta and trying to get him unbrainwashed, I guess, if you want to say it. And throughout most of the book, he does get unbrainwashed, and he realizes that Katniss was not the enemy, that they were actually very good friends. And through the epilogue, it kind of ended the way Harry Potter ended, where it's many years later, and Katniss and Peeta, it's not been said if they're married or not, but they end up having children, and there is no more Hunger Games, but Katniss is worried that eventually she will have to tell her children about the things that their parents went through, and she is really dreading that. So that's kind of where the book ends. It's kind of like with any kind of series, the first book is really good, and then maybe the second and third book are good, but they're not as good as the original. So I'm glad it ended the way it did, and I'm glad she decided to hopefully keep it a trilogy. I thought there may have been rumors that she was going to write a fourth book, but I don't know in what way she would. But anyway, I'm glad I finished that series, because I'm going to then start another series of the Dark Tower series. So the first book that I'm going to read next is The Gunslinger. I've not really read the Dark Tower series, so I'm looking forward to that. So I bid you all a happy day and happy reading.